This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Not sure if it matters what Americans still think, but a new Gallup poll says Trump's cruelty and xenophobia is backfiring. 79% of Americans say immigration is a net positive for the country, and we don't think there's much to be gained by terrorizing these people, no matter how rich that makes Trump's donors who run for-profit detention corporations like Geo Group and CoreCivic, which Attorney General Pam Bondi used to be a lobbyist for. America's disapproval for Trump's deportations now stand at 62%. Americans don't want this. And yes, deportations took place in large numbers during the Biden and Obama administrations, but not so indiscriminately and not with such savage delight and cruelty. We keep hearing stories of U.S. citizens with Hispanic last names or complexions arrested by ICE and getting held for days in detention centers before being released. Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama was asked about these accidental arrests, and he said they should serve as lessons to all of us. And that lesson, don't hang out with illegals. But these illegals Tommy Tuberville speaks of aren't illegal. They're documented. They're just not citizens. But they're all documented. They're all in the system, which is why ICE is able to find them. ICE arrests these people when they do their annual check-ins. These are law-abiding immigrants waiting for their immigration hearings, a wait as long as 4 years, and ICE, because they've been ordered to arrest 3,000 a day, ICE grabs them and says, forget your immigration hearing, we're detaining you because there's money to be made shipping you to a for-profit detention center. Americans don't like this. Every day brings fresh horror of a senior citizen gardener with 3 sons who served in the U.S. military getting beaten and arrested by ICE agents. Kids with cancer being separated from their fathers and their medications, then sent to Honduras. Every day we hear stories of tourists from Canada, Germany, and England held for weeks, shuttled from one for-profit detention facility to another, lost in a maze of bureaucracy, just so CoreCivic and Geo Group can charge the government for time served. There's money to be made in accidentally detaining tourists and U.S. citizens. So it's starting to feel like ICE isn't really there to enforce immigration policy. It's starting to feel like ICE is there to rack up profits for the for-profit detention centers and to punish blue cities or members of Congress like New Jersey Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, who was arrested along with the mayor of Newark, New Jersey back in May while they were trying to inspect a for-profit ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey, where Congresswoman McIver was shoved and then charged with assaulting 2 ICE agents because her elbow accidentally brushed up against these 2 ICE agents who required 0 medical attention. Her trial is set for November. The mayor of Newark was also arrested, but they released him. So maybe Americans are getting angry when they see stories about American citizens like George Redis, a disabled Marine veteran and U.S. citizen who was held for 3 days in a detention facility in Southern California, 3 days without the medical assistance he needed from injuries sustained while serving our country. He was not allowed to call a lawyer for 3 days, held without any charges for 3 days. Redis was working as a security guard on a farm that had just been raided by ICE in Camarillo, Texas. When the raid began, he got into his car to leave, but ICE agents, seeing that he was Hispanic, smashed his window and hit him with pepper spray, then took him in. Why? Because he was Hispanic. Doesn't matter that he served our country. Doesn't matter he's an American citizen. He doesn't look like the kind of Americans Republicans want as American citizens. Here's his sister, right after the arrest.
I thought he was probably part of the protest, and he wasn't. He was trying to reverse his car. They broke his window. They pepper sprayed him. They grabbed him, threw him on the floor. They detained him. His wife's been trying to call and ask where he is. They don't know where he is. Apparently, no one associates with nobody. So now we don't know what to do. We're just asking, let my brother go. He's a U.S. citizen. He didn't do anything wrong. He's a veteran, disabled citizen. It says it on his car.
And here is his wife.
And I just want to know where he's at because I have not seen him. And I heard from him since yesterday. And I called LA and they keep saying that they're not going over there. And I just don't know where he's at. I've been up since 6 a.m. trying to call the sheriffs, the police department, Oxnard, Camarillo, Ventura. And I can't hear nothing. They say they don't know. They don't associate.
He was eventually released, but this is the Republican Party's doing, and it's going to get a lot worse. Not counting the $45 billion specifically allocated towards building more for-profit ICE detention facilities, the new 2026 budget increases ICE's budget to roughly $28 billion a year, making it the single largest federal law enforcement agency in our country. ICE now gets more money than the FBI. ICE gets more money than the Coast Guard, more than our federal marshals, the DEA, more than the Bureau of Prisons, and more than the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. In terms of money, ICE is now our #1 law enforcement agency. 5 years ago, people like me, AOC, and even Kamala Harris were talking about abolishing ICE, or at least defunding it. Now it's morphed into Donald Trump's very own Palace Guard. Charlie Kirk is a college dropout who, with backing from the fossil fuel industry, transformed his Turning Point USA super PAC into a cash cow. It's the new CPAC, where he supposedly speaks to young people. He is also an unapologetic, virulent racist who said DEI was to blame for so many deaths after the flash floods in Texas. Kirk also says that he won't fly on a jet piloted by someone who is black because of DEI. He's not a racist. It's just because of DEI. We warned you that first it starts with undocumented immigrants, but then they start coming for you and me. Here is Charlie Kirk launching an attack against immigrants in general, not so-called illegal immigrants, but the story of America, legal immigrants who become U.S. citizens. Watch this. This is the great replacement theory in action. This is what Republicans believe, that dark-skinned people are coming into our country to destroy it. Watch.
Other thing that this generation increasingly believes, they don't necessarily believe that immigration makes your country better. You only get Mamdani, you get Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib not just because of illegal immigration. It's legal immigration that is also the problem. When you allow a bunch of people into your country legally and they don't share your values, turns out they don't always assimilate. Mamdani and his entire family came here legally. They didn't come across the southern border. No one can tell me that that person is improving the United States of America. He's a self-righteous, narcissistic parasite on New York City and should be expelled from politics. But we let him in. Maybe it's time. Maybe it is time for us to reconsider almost all of our political orthodoxies. Do immigrants really make our country better? Some do. Some of our amazing Cuban immigrants here that I see in the audience, you've assimilated, you make America better. But if you come from Somalia and you refuse to learn our language, adopt to our customs, and assimilate, I'm sorry, America is closed to the third world until further notice. We are not a dumping ground for the rest of the planet.
Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk. He hates most immigrants, but he's okay with Cubans. No, not that Cuban, not Mark Cuban. Right, that Cuban, Marco Rubio. In the GOP, Cubans are still okay. Eventually they won't be. When they run out of poor Mexicans, Guatemalans, and the El Salvadorans, to place in these for-profit detention centers, then they're going to be coming for the Cubans and the Jews, the Arabs, the blacks. That's the plan. Anyway, right now, Cubans are okay. Marco Rubio is our Secretary of State. He used to be the senator from Florida. 12 years ago, the then Florida senator, Cuban, crafted a bipartisan immigration bill that offered a path to citizenship for everyone in our country. His plan provided legal permanent resident status for all law-abiding immigrants, dreamers, and farm workers. It included speeding up the process for relatives of U.S. citizens. It was a bipartisan, somewhat compassionate bill that passed in the Senate but died in the Republican-controlled House. And then Rubio had to answer for that bill as Republicans went all in on xenophobia, despite a party-sanctioned autopsy after their defeat in the 2012 presidential election, advising Republican candidates to embrace, not alienate, Hispanic voters. Hispanic voters are not a monolithic bloc. Many want tighter borders, and there's a growing shift to the right as many abandon their Catholicism to embrace the intolerant evangelical Christian churches over which Republicans gained a stranglehold. So while Trump lost the Hispanic vote in 2016, calling them drug dealers and rapists, over time more are embracing him despite running the chances of their accidentally getting rounded up by ICE. In 2020, Trump only got 36% of the Hispanic vote. Last year, though, he got 48%. That's a lot of Hispanic voters who think he's not talking about me. It can't happen to me. But it can happen to you because it is happening to people who look and sound just like you. So I'm going to get to Rubio in a second, but I took a lot of grief when I said the problem isn't immigrants, the problem is ICE. I took a lot of grief when I said the problem isn't people trying to get into the country, the problem is not enough people trying to get into this country. I said for years that we need more immigration judges, we need more social workers to get these immigrants at the border. We got to get them where they're needed. Inside towns. I've crunched the numbers for you and gone over the hundreds of mid-sized communities in red states that are ghost towns, even offering people money to move there to help prop up their tax base and economy. I went over all the towns that are bringing back manufacturing but can't find workers. I've gone over the numbers showing America has a population implosion. We don't have enough people to work here, to pay into Social Security, to keep it going for the next generation. We have a shortage of people living here, and Republicans know this. It's one of the reasons they give for outlawing abortion. We're running short on people. There is, within the Republican Party, a growing pro-natalist movement. The pro-natalists are people like J.D. Vance, who warned that we need to encourage Americans to have more babies because there aren't enough workers. If you were to say to J.D. Vance, but what about all those people down at the border? He'd say, Haitians are eating cats and dogs. The Haitians were living in Springfield, Ohio, the ones he accused of stealing cats and dogs to eat them. They were brought to Springfield because there were jobs in Springfield, but nobody to fill them. The mayor of Springfield, a Republican, the governor of Ohio, a Republican, begged J.D. Vance last year to knock it off. But J.D. Vance is a racist. He doesn't want the people at the border to solve our population problem, because he's a white nationalist. Donald Trump is also a pro-natalist, and he wants to give citizens baby bonuses for having more kids. He knows we need more people, just not the dark-skinned people at the border. Last year, he literally told a group of donors How come we can't get immigrants from nice countries like Denmark, Switzerland, and Norway? According to the Associated Press, in 2018, Trump was quoted saying inside the Oval Office, how come we get immigrants from shithole countries like Africa and Haiti instead of places like Norway, unquote. Last month, his travel ban forbidding visitors from 19 countries went into effect. And what do all 19 of these countries have in common? Lots and lots of pigment. Chad, Haiti, Somalia, Sudan, Togo. These countries are either primarily black or Hispanic. Pro-natalist Republican senators like Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee have proposed more generous federal funding for states that are making more babies. But those babies at the border, she says we have a moral obligation to make sure the undocumented babies living here in the United States never get a penny of our Medicaid spending. That's what Marsha Blackburn said. Nobody, she said, should be gaming the system, including babies. Sean Duffy, our current Secretary of Transportation, has ordered his department to prioritize communities with rising birth and marriage rates when handing out federal grants because he says we just don't have enough people. So the only immigration problem is we don't have enough immigrants. But Republicans don't want immigrants, at least dark-skinned ones. Unless they're Cubans, like Marco Rubio, whose family came to this country fleeing Fidel Castro, they tend to vote Republican. Marco Rubio is smart, and there was a time when he recognized the institutionalized racism behind America's immigration policy. That's why he introduced his immigration bill, for which he paid a serious price, especially from bigots like Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter. His immigration bill revealed who the Republican Party had become. They subscribe to the Great Replacement theory, where dark people are flooding the borders to turn white people into powerless minorities. 2 years after introducing his immigration bill, Rubio apologized for what he called his mistake. And he said it taught him a lesson. And that lesson was solving immigration for the Republican Party is incredibly unpopular. That's what he said. So he apologized for his plan, a plan that would have improved the lives of nearly 14 million Americans living and working here, but lacking the proper documentation. Rubio is a politician with zero moral compass. His mind is facile. I've always found him to be the sharpest of the Republican candidates. And because he's ambitious, no doubt thinking about his next step should Trump miraculously decide to abandon the Oval Office, Marco Rubio drifts wherever the MAGA-infused Republican fumes take him. So now he's all in on Trump's immigration policy, which is no immigration, throw them all out, and deny visas to your political enemies on the international stage. It's the polar opposite of what Rubio stood for in 2013, a true profile in political cowardice. At first, when Rubio became Secretary of State, he sported a pained expression. If you go back to when he ran against Trump in 2016, Rubio seemed at the time to know right from wrong. But now he's become Trump's henchman. First, as Secretary of State, ordering Muslim college students to be detained and deported by ICE for speaking out against Israel's treatment of Palestinians. Then Trump gave Rubio the task of heading U.S. aid in order to shut it down, resulting in hundreds of thousands of people desperate for food and medicine dying around the world. According to the British medical journal Lancet, as of June 26, 2025, thanks to Rubio's cuts to U.S. aid, 332,553 people have died worldwide, including 225,000 children. When asked if he felt bad about all these children dying from malnutrition thanks to his cuts, Rubio said, why aren't other wealthy nations stepping up to take America's place? Why is it our fault? So now Rubio's embraced it all, roundups of the innocents, negotiating the transfer of migrants to that El Salvadoran dungeon, cutting off foreign aid, even revoking visas for Brazilian judges who are prosecuting former President Jair Bolsonaro, an ally of Trump. Bolsonaro led an insurrection after failing to get reelected. He's on trial right now, and the judges just had their U.S. visas revoked. Rubio's all in. You know, Neil Armstrong was once asked, was there a moment when you were walking on the moon and you just freaked out and said, I can't believe I'm walking on the moon? And Neil Armstrong said, you'd be amazed how quickly humans can adapt and get used to something. And that applies to Rubio. He's adapted. He's all in. He's not freaking out. He doesn't feel bad anymore. He's used to it. It's kind of like cheating on your spouse. The first time you feel bad, it gets easier and easier the more you do it. Here is Rubio testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat, you might remember, he flew down to El Salvador to secure the release of his constituent, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was accidentally deported by ICE, but is now currently held in a Tennessee federal prison on charges of human smuggling. Why is he being charged with human smuggling? Because instead of admitting they made a mistake, the Trump administration railroaded this kid on another charge because his accidental ICE abduction embarrassed Trump. Senator Van Hollen voted to confirm Rubio as Secretary of State because that's what senators do. It's a tradition. You confirm your own, especially Rubio, who most Democrats, including me, held out hope that Rubio would be the one reasonable voice inside the Trump administration. We were wrong. Rubio turned out to be just as disgraceful as the rest of them. Here is Senator Chris Van Hollen laying into Rubio for cutting U.S. aid.
And I have to tell you directly and personally that I regret voting for you for Secretary of State. I yield back.
May I respond?
You may sit.
Well, first of all, your regret for voting for me confirms I'm doing a good job based on what I know.
That's just a flippant statement, Mr. Secretary.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
You may. I didn't ask.
Senator, please let the Secretary.
I'd be happy to, but then I can respond to his.
Your time's up, Senator, and willfully used, I might add.
Well,
your remarks do not represent the view of this committee.
Well, Mr.
Secretary, please.
Well, I can't respond to everything he said because much of these are untrue, but I'll go through a few. First of all, I'm actually very proud of the work we've done with USAID. For example, I don't regret cutting $10 million for male circumcisions in Mozambique. I don't know how that makes us stronger and more prosperous as a nation.
250,000 dead children because of this prick. On April 17th of this year, Senator Chris Van Hollen went down to El Salvador and met with Garcia, who, as I said earlier, was finally sent back to the United States, but is still being held on trumped-up charges. This is Rubio glibly trashing Abrego Garcia.
In the case of El Salvador, absolutely. Absolutely. We deported gang members, including the one you had a margarita with. And that guy is a human trafficker, and that guy is a gangbanger, and the evidence is going to be clear in the days that
Mr. Chairman, who you went to Senator, please, Senator Rubio has the floor.
Chairman, he can't make unsubstantiated
Senator
like that.
Secretary Rubio has the floor.
Secretary Rubio should take that testimony to the federal court of the United States because he hasn't done it under oath.
That's right. That's right. The problem for the Trump administration is they enjoy spreading lies about people until they're in a courtroom where lies like that can get you locked up for contempt of court. And that, as you're about to see, poses a serious problem for Pam Bondi and her Justice Department. You see, Pam Bondi is a liar, and she's instructed her U.S. attorneys to lie. But the U.S. attorneys know they can't lie in court, especially when they're going before a judge. As I just said, Abrego Garcia is being held inside a federal prison in Tennessee on trumped-up charges of human smuggling because it's just too horrible for the Trump White House to admit ICE made a mistake, even though ICE said it made a mistake when it accidentally abducted Garcia. Garcia's lawyers requested that he remain inside the federal prison in Tennessee, where he's being held on these bogus human smuggling charges. They're asking that he stay in the prison because ICE, on orders from up above, ICE said if Garcia is released on bond, then ICE will grab him before he can go on trial for human smuggling, and because he's not a U.S. citizen, ICE will ship him off to a foreign jail, somewhere similar to the one they sent him in El Salvador. And the Supreme Court just ruled Trump can ship migrants to third countries where the detainee doesn't speak the language and has zero access to his relatives and a U.S. immigration lawyer. And remember, ICE openly admitted they deported Garcia by mistake. Garcia had temporary protected legal status. He was not allowed to be shipped to El Salvador or any other place because up until the Trump administration felt humiliated by Garcia, Garcia had not been charged with any crime. Attorney General Pam Bondi, trained by Trump, never admits she's wrong, even when it means you have to lie. Like Rubio. You lie. She repeatedly accuses Garcia of being an MS-13 gang member who conspired in the murder of a rival gang leader. She even accused him of spreading child pornography. After Garcia was sent back to the United States, she indicted him on charges of human smuggling, but on none of the other lies she and Marco Rubio spread about Garcia. Nothing to do with the murder. Nothing to do with the child pornography, they claim. Can't prove he's MS-13. Human trafficking. She's just accusing him of human smuggling. So this is exactly what a police state looks like. Exactly. U.S. District Judge Waverly Crenshaw, assigned to Garcia's human smuggling trial down in Tennessee, Judge Crenshaw was supposed to decide on whether to release Garcia last week on bond, but Judge Crenshaw delayed the ruling, while at the same time he expressed skepticism about the Justice Department's key witnesses in the case against Garcia. The judge also said there doesn't seem to be any evidence to suggest Garcia, as our Attorney General claims, is a member of MS-13. And the judge said if Garcia isn't a member of MS-13, there would be no justification to keep him detained before the human smuggling trial because he's not a flight risk. But the problem for Garcia and this judge is that ICE said if Garcia is released on bond, ICE would immediately grab, detain, and ship Garcia to a foreign country where he would be detained forever. And ICE refuses to say which country they would send him to. So, what happens to the human smuggling indictment, Pam Bondi? What happens if ICE grabs him and sends him off to Sudan? What about the human smuggling indictment? Well, Pam Bondi couldn't give a rat's ass about that. She just wants Garcia to disappear. He's an embarrassment. Should Garcia be released from that Tennessee jail pending criminal trial for this bogus human smuggling? Look how young he looks. That's him holding his baby. He's a baby. Jesus. Should Garcia be released from that Tennessee jail pending criminal trial for human smuggling? His immigration status immediately falls under the jurisdiction of federal judge Paula Sinas. Supposedly, she could block ICE from shipping Garcia off to Sudan or wherever. Judge Paula Sinas serves on the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, where Garcia lived with his wife and children, all U.S. citizens. He was living in Maryland until ICE accidentally snatched him. Judge Sinas has been highly critical of the Justice Department's handling of Garcia's deportation, calling it an insult to her intelligence. Back in April, Judge Sinas demanded an explanation from the Justice Department lawyer assigned to the Garcia deportation case. His name is Erez Ruveni. The judge wanted to know why, if ICE admitted Garcia shouldn't have been deported, why is Attorney General Pam Bondi sending a lawyer into my courtroom to argue against bringing Garcia back to the United States? Ruveni, the lawyer Pam Bondi sent into the judge's courtroom, he was representing the Justice Department. He broke down. He couldn't do it. He couldn't lie before the judge. Ruveni told the judge, Judge Sinas, he was frustrated by his bosses inside the Justice Department who refused to give him answers as to why Garcia should remain in El Salvador. Ruveni told the judge that I recommended to my Justice Department, to my bosses, we bring Garcia back to the United States. And then Ruveni said to the judge, I have no idea why that recommendation was ignored. Ruveni told the judge, while arguing on behalf of the Justice Department, that ICE admits Garcia was deported due to an administrative order. And he said, despite Pam Bondi claiming Garcia is a member of MS-13, she has not provided him, Ruveni, her lawyer, with any evidence to back up that claim before the judge. So let me back up here because this is so outlandish and disgraceful, and I know it's hard to keep track of. So let me just spell this out simply. Kilmar Abrego Garcia came to the United States as a teenager to escape the gangs of El Salvador. In 2019, he was wrongly arrested by a bad cop in Maryland who wrongly accused Garcia of gang affiliation. Garcia went before a judge who ruled Garcia was not a gang member. The judge said, in fact, Garcia needs protected legal status to make sure he is never sent back to El Salvador. Earlier this year, ICE admitted it accidentally grabbed Garcia and shipped him to that dungeon in El Salvador, even though another judge ordered the 3 flights carrying roughly 300 migrants, including Garcia, to turn around. That order was ignored. There were 3 planes filled with migrants being sent to El Salvador. This judge said, turn those planes around, and that order was ignored by our Justice Department, and Garcia ended up being held in that El Salvadoran dungeon until the Justice Department relented, brought Garcia back to America, and then, to save face, the Justice Department dreamed up these charges of human smuggling, all based on a 2022 traffic stop for speeding in Tennessee. Garcia got pulled over, but he wasn't even given a traffic ticket. He was given a warning for driving with an expired license. That was it. Wasn't arrested. Didn't get a traffic ticket, and he returned to Maryland. But from that one traffic stop, our Justice Department is now building a human trafficking case against Garcia because they refuse to admit ICE made a mistake. They refuse to admit that so many innocent people are being abducted by ICE. Back when Garcia was still being held in El Salvador, Pam Bondi ordered her Justice Department attorney, Erez Ruveni, to go before Judge Sinas and argue that Garcia should remain in El Salvador, that ICE didn't make a mistake because he was a known MS-13 member. But Ruveni did as he was told. He went before the judge, but he folded. He couldn't do it. He couldn't lie. He told the judge, my bosses at the Justice Department have provided me with zero evidence to back up these arguments that they want me to make. Unbelievable. So Garcia eventually was released from the El Salvador dungeon, and in order to save face, Pam Bondi and the Justice Department took that 2022 traffic stop where Garcia didn't even get a ticket, and they've turned that into charges of human smuggling. And that trial is taking place in Tennessee, where Garcia was pulled over by a state trooper and wasn't given a ticket. He was given a warning citation for having an expired license. And the judge assigned to that case right now is afraid to release Garcia on bond, even though the judge said he's obviously not a gang member or a flight risk. The judge assigned to the human trafficking case is afraid to release Garcia because if he did, ICE says they will grab Garcia and ship him off to a third country. So Garcia's lawyers need to keep Garcia in a federal prison to protect him from ICE. This is effed up on so many levels. Ruveni, the justice lawyer who wouldn't lie for Pam Bondi, was immediately suspended and subsequently fired by the Justice Department. In firing him, Pam Bondi warned other U.S. attorneys they would meet the same fate if they failed to argue zealously for their client, and that client is Donald Trump. Think about this. Bondi ordered Ruveni to argue Garcia was MS-13 and that he belonged in that El Salvadoran prison, that it wasn't a mistake. But she offered him no evidence to back up those claims for when she sent Ruveni before that judge. When Ruveni told the judge the truth, that he had no evidence to support the Justice Department's claims, he was fired. And now he's a whistleblower, claiming he saw firsthand evidence that the Justice Department under Pam Bondi and the homunculus Emil Bove, he's the third in command, he provided evidence as a whistleblower that Bove openly warned Justice Department lawyers, quote, "We may have to say F you to the courts and not follow their directives." The whistleblower is charging that Bove said these deportations are happening with or without the judge's approval. And those deportations did in fact take place despite Judge James Boasberg ordering 3 ICE planes headed for El Salvador carrying suspected gang leaders, including Abrego Garcia, to turn around in flight. Judge Boasberg issued the order, and the Justice Department lied to him, saying it's too late. They've already landed in El Salvador. But if you look at the timeline, the planes were still in the air and the flights should have been turned around. But the Justice Department ignored Judge Boasberg's order. So Garcia and nearly 300 migrants ended up in that El Salvadoran prison. According to 60 Minutes, 75% of those men on that flight had 0 criminal record. Of the 25% who did have criminal records, nearly all of them were for non-violent misdemeanors, which means they're not criminal records, which means they're not criminals. The worst of the worst. That's what Trump claims. He's only deporting the worst of the worst. According to the latest government data from ICE, 71.7% of all those detained by ICE have 0 criminal records. There are something like 56,000 migrants in these for-profit ICE detention centers. 71.7% have 0 criminal records. According to Ruveni, he's the whistleblower, Emil Bove, and according to emails the whistleblower turned over to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Emil Bove, third in command of the Justice Department, was the one telling Justice Department lawyers these deportations have to go through and we might just have to say F you to these judges. And now Bove, this rageaholic, has been nominated for a lifetime appointment by Trump to sit on the Third Circuit Court. Last Thursday, the Republican-controlled Senate Judiciary Committee recommended him to go before a full vote of the Senate, despite all the Democrats on the committee storming out in protest. Take about 3 Republican senators not to approve him. Bad guy. Well, the good news is Alina Habba was appointed by Trump to be the interim U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey, but it looks like it's just temporary. She will not get confirmed by the Senate, so she's leaving her job as the U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey. Alina Habba, any comments on not getting to be a U.S. attorney?
I need to do a number 1 and a number 2 and a number 3, which is all the stupid stuff that comes pouring out of my mouth. I call that doing a number 3.
I think that's AI. That's probably AI. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please subscribe to my newsletter and my channel. And what else? Hit the notifications bell. I will see everybody tomorrow.